Hello! Welcome back to another evening of shared stories and adventures. Tonight we're diving into the final chapter of Stranger Things. Now, growing up watching the series from the very beginning back in 2016, I honestly didn't realise how invested I'd become in these characters and their story. But the more I've looked into Season 5 theories and the Duffer Brothers hints over the years, the more there is to unpack. I think if you're a casual fan or just really enjoyed the show, there's loads of interesting predictions to explore, and I'll be covering all the theories and possibilities I can fit in for tonight, but there's definitely more to come. So, we'll start with where Season 4 left off and what mysteries need resolving. Then we'll move on to character predictions, plot theories, and some properly wild speculation. Plenty to get talking about, but if you like what I do here, and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. But for now, grab your blanket, get cozy on the couch, and let's begin. So at the end of Season 4, Hawkins is basically a disaster zone. Like proper apocalypse scenario, Max Mayfield is in a coma at the hospital after being brutally attacked by Vecna. Her arms and legs were broken, she was blind, and she technically died for over a minute before 11 brought her back. But here's the thing, when 11 tries to find Max in the void, that black space where she can usually locate people, Max isn't there. Her body's alive, but her consciousness is just gone. Which raises the massive question of where exactly her mind ended up. Vecna himself survived the confrontation with Nancy, Steve and Robin. They set him on fire, shot him, and he fell out a window. But when they went looking for his body, it had vanished. He's injured, definitely, but he's still out there, and he managed to complete most of his plan anyway. The 4 gates that opened at each murder site combined into one massive rift that tore straight through the centre of Hawkins. The town experienced what everyone thinks is an earthquake, but it's actually the upside down, breaking through into the real world. There's a time jump of 2 days, and we see the aftermath. The town is devastated. There are relief efforts, and people are being evacuated, but the really ominous part is the ending. Will Byers feels that familiar sensation on the back of his neck, the one that means the Mind Flayer is active. He tells Mike he's not going to stop, not until he's taken everyone. And then we get these shots of the upside-down particles, that sort of ash or snow from the alternate dimension, falling over Hawkins. Plants are dying. The sky has this reddish tint. The boundary between dimensions is collapsing, and Vecna's still alive to continue his plan. This sets up what's basically the end of the world for the final season. No more small-town mysteries or secret government conspiracies. It's all out in the open now, and everyone in Hawkins can see that something supernatural is happening. Now, there are loads of unresolved questions that Season 5 absolutely has to address. Some of these have been hanging around since Season 1, and others are brand new from Season 4's revelations. First and most pressing is what happened to Max's consciousness. Her body's alive, her heart's beating, but 11 can't find her mind anywhere. Some theories suggest Vecna's holding her consciousness hostage in his mind space, which would make sense given that he needs 4 victims to complete his plan. He got 3.5 basically. Max died, which might have counted, but then 11 revived her. So is Max's trapped mind the missing piece? Then there's the bigger question of what Vecna's ultimate endgame actually is. He told Nancy he wants to remake the world in his image, showing her a vision of Hawkins destroyed and covered in the red lightning and creatures from the upside down. But is that just Hawkins, or is it the entire world? And what happens after? Does he want to rule over this new world? Or does he literally just want to destroy humanity because he thinks we're all inferior? The upside down itself is a massive mystery. Why is it frozen on November 6, 1983? That's the exact day Will Byers disappeared, which can't be a coincidence. Some people think it's because that's when 11 opened the first gate, but 11 had already made contact with the Demogorgon before that. So did the Upside Down exist before 11? Or did she somehow create it when she banished Henry Creel there in 1979? The timeline doesn't quite add up. Will's connection to the whole thing needs explanation too. He was possessed by the Mind Flayer in Season 2, and even though it was exorcised, he can still sense when the Mind Flayer is active. Is this just residual connection, or is there something deeper? Some theories suggest Will might have latent powers similar to Eleven's, which would explain why the Demogorgon targeted him specifically back in Season 1. And then there's the relationship between Vecna and the Mind Flayer. In Season 4, we learned that Henry Creel, Vecna, whatever you want to call him, found the Mind Flayer when Eleven sent him to the Upside Down. He apparently shaped it into the spider-like form we've seen, but some fans question whether Vecna's actually in control, or if the Mind Flayer is ancient and powerful, and just using Vecna as a puppet. That would be a proper twist if the Mind Flayer turns out to be the real villain all along. There's also the question of how the gate mechanics work. Eleven opened gates before, but she could close them too. Vecna's gates seem different, more permanent, especially now that they've merged. Can they even be closed at this point? And what would closing them do to the upside-down creatures already in Hawkins? These mysteries are basically the backbone of what Season 5 needs to wrap up. Without answers to these questions, the ending won't feel complete. Before looking into all this, I honestly hadn't realised how many clues the Duffer Brothers have dropped in interviews about Season 5. They've been pretty careful not to spoil anything major, but there are definitely hints if you read between the lines. The biggest thing they've mentioned is that Season 5 is meant to mirror Season 1 in a lot of ways. Ross Duffer specifically compared it to Star Wars, saying if Season 1 was A New Hope, then Season 5 is Return of the Jedi. That's interesting because Return of the Jedi is about coming full circle, closing out storylines, and yes, killing off some beloved characters in the process. The original trilogy didn't end with everyone surviving, and the Duffers have basically confirmed that Season 5 won't either. They've also said repeatedly that they've had the ending planned since the very beginning. There's apparently a document from when they first pitched the show that outlines how it all concludes. Now, obviously, things changed along the way. The show was originally supposed to be an anthology series, then they realised they wanted to continue with the same characters. But the core ending, the final fate of Hawkins and the main characters, that's been locked in for years. Matt Duffer mentioned in one interview that Season 5 will be darker and more mature than previous seasons. Which makes sense given that the characters have aged and the stakes are literally apocalyptic now. But it also suggests that this isn't going to be a clean, happy ending where everyone walks away unscathed. They've used the phrase bittersweet a few times, which in TV finale language usually means some characters get happy endings while others die or suffer permanent loss. One really interesting detail is that there's no time jump between Season 4 and 5. The final season picks up right where we left off, with Hawkins in chaos and the Upside Down bleeding into reality. This is different from previous seasons, which often had months between them. It suggests Season 5 is going to be intense and fast-paced, probably taking place over just a few days. The Duffers have also emphasised callbacks to Season 1. They've said fans should rewatch the first season before Season 5 because there will be direct references and payoffs to things established way back then. This could mean anything from the Christmas lights communication system to the Demogorgon's behaviour to Will's original disappearance. Everything comes full circle, apparently. And perhaps most tellingly, when asked if everyone survives, both Duffers got uncomfortable and basically said, "It's a final season, it's war, not everyone's making it out." That's about as clear a death warning as you can get, without outright spoiling who dies. With those hints in mind, the pieces start to fit together in some pretty interesting ways. The ending's going to hurt, but it's been planned for years, and it'll apparently feel inevitable once we see it. Now let's talk about the characters themselves and where their stories might be headed. This is probably the most emotional part to predict, because we've spent 8 years with these people. Whatever happens to them in Season 5, it's going to feel massive. Let's start with the obvious one. Eleven's arc is basically the heart of the entire show. Her journey from laboratory experiment to found family member to powerful hero has been the emotional core since day one. So how does her story end? The most common prediction is some form of sacrifice. Eleven's powers have always come at a cost. She gets nosebleeds, she passes out. And in Season 4, we saw her literally burn out her powers trying to save Max. The show's been building toward the idea that ultimate power requires ultimate sacrifice. So it's very possible that defeating Vecna requires Eleven to use her powers one final time in a way that either kills her or removes her abilities permanently. Now, I think the death option is less likely, if I'm honest. The Duffers aren't that cruel, and Eleven dying would be properly devastating in a way that might actually undermine the show's themes about found family and survival. But losing her powers? That could work as a bittersweet ending. She saves the world, but becomes a normal girl, which is ironically what she's wanted all along. She gets to live a regular life with Hopper and Joyce, go to school normally, have a real adolescence. It's a happy ending disguised as a loss. There's also the question of her relationship with Max. If Max's consciousness is trapped somewhere, Eleven's going to be the one to bring her back. That feels inevitable. She brought Max back from clinical death once already, so going into whatever void or mind space Vecna's keeping her in and retrieving her seems like the obvious play. That could be part of the final confrontation, Eleven invading Vecna's mind, while others attack him physically. What's really interesting is Eleven's relationship to Vecna himself. They have this twisted father-daughter dynamic, both being products of Brenner's experiments. One became a hero, one became a monster, but they're mirrors of each other. Henry Creel even tried to get young Eleven to join him back in the lab. So the final battle between them isn't just good versus evil. It's about what you do with power and trauma. Eleven chose to connect with others and protect people. Henry chose isolation and domination. Their confrontation is philosophical as much as physical. I'd say Eleven's ending involves losing her powers to close the gates permanently, probably after rescuing Max and delivering the final blow to Vecna. She survives but becomes normal, which is both sad and hopeful. She's earned a quiet life. Whatever happens to Eleven, it's going to be the emotional core of the finale. Her choice, her sacrifice, her victory. That's what the whole show's been building toward. Now, Max's situation is probably the biggest question mark going into Season 5. She's in a coma with no brain activity, and Eleven can't locate her consciousness anywhere. So where is she, and is she coming back? The most optimistic theory is that Vecna's holding her mind hostage in his mental prison, the same place where he keeps his victims while he's killing them. We saw glimpses of this space in Season 4, that red hellscape with the vines and the grandfather clock. If Max's consciousness is trapped there, it means she's technically still alive in some form, just disconnected from her body. Eleven could potentially go in and retrieve her. The darker possibility is that Max is actually gone. Her mind was destroyed when she died, and even though Eleven restarted her heart, there was nothing left to bring back. She's effectively brain dead, and the Max we knew is just gone. This would be absolutely heartbreaking, but it would also be a brutal reminder that death has consequences, even in a show with supernatural powers. Not everyone can be saved. There's a middle ground theory too. Maybe Max is in some sort of limbo state, not fully dead, but not alive either. She's trapped between dimensions, or in some remnant of the Upside Down, conscious but unable to reach anyone. This could set up a rescue mission plotline where the characters have to find a way to bring her back, without knowing if it's even possible. What makes Max's fate so uncertain is that it serves multiple narrative purposes depending on which direction they go. If she comes back, it's a triumph, a hard-won victory that shows love and determination can overcome even death. It would give Lucas his happy ending and reward Eleven's desperate attempt to save her friend. If she stays in a coma or dies permanently, it's tragedy. It would be the show acknowledging that sometimes you can't save everyone, no matter how hard you try. Lucas would have to deal with grief and survivor's guilt. The group would carry that loss into the final battle. It would raise the stakes considerably, because if Max can die, anyone can. I mean, think about it. Max has already served as a catalyst for character development all season. Her death or survival affects Lucas, 11, the entire group's emotional state going into the finale. The Duffers could go either way, and it would work narratively. My gut says she comes back, but not easily. There will be a whole rescue arc, probably involving 11 invading Vecna's mind palace, or the Upside Down itself. She'll come back changed, maybe traumatized, definitely not the same Max we knew, but she'll survive because the show needs some hope among all the darkness. Max's fate is honestly one of the predictions I'm least confident about, because it could go either way, and both options have serious emotional weight. Will Byers started this whole thing, and there's pretty much no way his story doesn't circle back, in a major way, for the finale. He was the first victim, the first person taken to the Upside Down, and he's maintained a connection to that place ever since. Season 5 has to give him a proper hero moment. The most obvious setup is that Will's continued connection to the Mind Flayer, or Vecna, makes him essential to the final battle. He can sense when the Upside Down is active, he knows when danger is coming, and theoretically, he might be able to sense Vecna's location or plans. This makes him valuable as an early warning system, but it could be more than that. Some theories suggest Will might be able to use his connection offensively, maybe even turning the tables and infiltrating Vecna's mind the way he was once possessed. There's also the more metaphysical theory that Will has latent powers similar to Eleven's. Why else would the Demogorgon specifically target him in Season 1? It knew where to find him. It took him to the Upside Down instead of killing him immediately, and he survived there for a week, when most people would die in hours. Either Will's incredibly lucky, or there's something special about him that we haven't fully discovered yet. His true sight, his ability to sense the Mind Flayer, these could all be manifestations of subtle psychic abilities. Now, beyond the supernatural elements, Will also has personal story that needs resolution. His feelings for Mike have been pretty heavily implied throughout Season 4, and that subplot can't just be dropped. Whether it's a confession, an acceptance, or just an acknowledgement, Will's emotional arc needs closure. Mike's his best friend, and Will's been in love with him, and that's going to come up in Season 5, probably during a critical moment where honesty becomes necessary. What's really interesting is the parallel between Will's physical journey and emotional journey. He started the series trapped and invisible, literally in another dimension where no one could see him. Now he's older, and he's still somewhat trapped and invisible, but emotionally this time. His sexuality is something he hasn't fully expressed, and his importance to the group sometimes gets overshadowed by 11 or the others with powers. Season 5 needs to bring him out of the shadows, in every sense. I think Will's ending involves him being the key to defeating Vecna, specifically because of his connection to the Upside Down. Maybe he's the one who can sense how to close the gates, or he's immune to Vecna's powers, or he can navigate the Upside Down better than anyone. The victim becomes the hero. That's good storytelling, and it would complete his arc from scared kid to brave young man who saves everyone. Plus, Will deserves a proper hero moment after spending most of the series being rescued or possessed or crying in the background. Let the boy have his victory. The original party has been through hell together, but Season 5 feels like it might split them up permanently, one way or another. They're aging out of childhood, and the real world is going to pull them in different directions, assuming they survive the apocalypse. Mike's got this hero complex where he constantly puts himself in danger to protect 11 or his friends. It's been his character trait since Season 1, jumping off cliffs, making desperate plays, always rushing toward danger instead of away from it. That kind of behaviour usually catches up with you in a final season. I'm not saying Mike's definitely going to die, but he's absolutely the type to make a sacrificial play if it means saving 11 or the group. His ending probably involves a grand gesture, whether that's a confession to Will, a sacrifice for 11, or a leadership moment where he holds the group together. Dustin's arc has been about found family and brotherhood. His relationship with Steve became one of the show's most beloved dynamics, and losing Eddie Munson in season 4 hit him hard. Dustin's the heart of the group in a lot of ways, the glue that keeps everyone connected. His ending probably involves him processing grief and learning that you can lose people and still move forward. Maybe he goes off to college and becomes a scientist or engineer, carrying forward the legacy of everyone who helped him along the way. Lucas has the most to lose going into season 5 because Max is in a coma, and it's partially because he wasn't there when Vecna attacked. He was busy fighting Jason and his basketball goons. That guilt is going to drive him hard. Lucas's arc is about identity, being torn between different social groups, and ultimately choosing the people who really matter. His ending ties directly to whether Max survives. If she wakes up, his arc is about devotion and reward. If she doesn't, it's about living with loss and guilt. The party as a whole might not stay together after season 5, even if they all survive. They're at the age where people go to college, move away, start new lives. The campaign is ending, both literally in their D&D games and metaphorically in their childhood adventures. That's bittersweet but natural. Growing up means growing apart sometimes, even when you love each other. What I think will happen is a time jump epilogue, showing them reuniting years later, maybe playing D&D with their own kids, showing that the bonds forged in childhood last forever, even when physical distance separates you. That would be properly emotional. The party's ending is going to hurt no matter what, because it's the end of childhood and the end of their daily adventures together. Even survival feels like loss when it means saying goodbye. The older teens have their own whole subplot that needs resolution, and honestly, it's proper messy. There's relationship drama, personal dreams, and competing futures all tangled up together. Let's start with the elephant in the room. The Steve, Nancy, Jonathan love triangle has been dragging on for multiple seasons now, and season 5 has to actually resolve it. Nancy's been torn between her first love, Jonathan, and her ex Steve pretty much since season 2. Both are good guys, both care about her, but she needs to make a choice, or the show needs to make the choice for her. Here's where it gets dark. Steve's the most likely of the main characters to die, and I hate saying that because he's become such a fan favourite. But think about it. He had that whole speech in season 4 about his future, wanting 6 kids, road tripping with Nancy, the whole domestic dream. In TV writing, that's called a death flag. When a character starts talking about their detailed future plans, they usually don't make it to see them. Steve's hero complex, his protector instinct, especially toward the kids, sets him up perfectly for a sacrificial death. He'd absolutely throw himself in front of danger to save Dustin or Robin or any of the kids. It's who he is. If Steve dies, it resolves the love triangle by default. Nancy and Jonathan end up together. But it's tragic because Nancy has to live with wondering what could have been with Steve. It also gives Robin massive emotional trauma, losing her best friend and platonic soulmate. That would be gutting for her character. But maybe the Duffers don't go that route. Maybe Steve survives, and Nancy chooses Jonathan, and Steve has to accept it and move on with his life. That's painful in a different way. Less dramatic but more realistic. Not everyone gets their happy ending, even when they survive the monster. Jonathan's arc is about family responsibility versus personal dreams. He spent the entire series putting Will and his mum first, sacrificing his own wants. Season 5 needs to either reward that devotion or force him to finally choose himself. If everyone survives, maybe Jonathan goes to college in California, pursues photography, lives his life. If there are casualties, maybe he stays in Hawkins to take care of what's left of his family. Robin's probably the safest of this group, if I'm honest. She's queer representation in a show that hasn't had much, and killing her off would feel cheap. Her arc is about finding her people and coming into her own. Her ending is probably getting into a good college, maintaining her friendship with Steve and building a relationship with Vicky. She deserves a happy ending, and I think she'll get one. What's interesting about this group is they've basically become co-protagonists alongside the kids. They're not just babysitters anymore. They're legitimate heroes in their own right. Their ending has to acknowledge that growth while also letting them move into adulthood. To be honest, I think Steve dies protecting the others, Nancy ends up with Jonathan, and Robin goes off to college with bittersweet memories of the best friend she lost. That's the tragedy that would hurt the most while still feeling earned. The adults in Stranger Things have basically been through as much trauma as the kids, if not more. They deserve some peace after everything. Hopper's survived Russian prison, multiple near-death experiences, losing his daughter Sarah years ago, and basically being resurrected from presumed death. The man's been through it. His arc has always been about found family and second chances. He lost Sarah, but he gained 11. He lost his relationship with Joyce, but he got it back. Season 5 needs to give him some form of happy ending, even if it's just survival, and officially adopting 11. I mean, come on, Hopper's earned a retirement. Let the man live in a cabin somewhere with Joyce raising 11 and probably Will and Jonathan too at this point. Give him the family he's been desperately trying to protect for 5 seasons. Joyce has been one of the most resilient characters in the entire show. She lost her boyfriend, Bob, in Season 2, nearly lost Will multiple times, spent all of Season 4 rescuing Hopper from Russia. She's the mum who never gives up, and that tenacity has to be rewarded. Her ending is probably moving away from Hawkins, taking her found family somewhere safe, and finally getting to be happy with Hopper without another crisis immediately erupting. Now, Murray's an interesting case. He's the comic relief conspiracy theorist who's somehow become integral to the plot. He helped Joyce and Hopper get together. He went to Russia with them. He's been there for major moments. But comic relief characters are actually pretty vulnerable in final seasons because their death creates shock value without destroying the core emotional relationships. Murray dying heroically, probably making some sarcastic comment as he goes, wouldn't shock me at all. But maybe they let him live. Maybe Murray gets to go back to being a weird hermit conspiracy theorist, drinking vodka and translating Russian documents, knowing that he helped save the world, and no one will ever believe him. That's fitting too. The parental sacrifice trope is definitely in play here. Either Hopper or Joyce throwing themselves into danger to save the kids is narratively possible, but I think the Duffers might subvert that. They've been through enough. Let the parents survive for once. These characters have earned a retirement in California, or wherever they end up. Give them the cabin in the woods, the found family, the peace they've been fighting for. But let's talk about the big predictions now, the plot itself, and how this whole thing might actually end. Character arcs are one thing, but the mechanics of defeating Vecna and closing the Upside Down, that's where the real speculation gets interesting. So way before we can predict the ending, we need to understand what Vecna's actually trying to accomplish. His plan got revealed in bits and pieces throughout Season 4, but the full scope is still somewhat murky. Vecna, or Henry Creel, or One, whatever name you prefer, stated pretty clearly that he wants to remake the world. He thinks humanity is fundamentally flawed, that we're all just predators and prey hiding behind fake morality and civilization. He showed Nancy a vision of Hawkins completely overrun by the Upside Down, with dead soldiers and creatures and destruction everywhere. But the question is whether that's just Hawkins or if it's the whole world. The way the gates work seems to be key. Vecna needed 4 victims to create 4 gates, which would then merge into one massive rift. He got 3 and technically a 4th when Max died briefly. The gates merged as planned, tearing open Central Hawkins. Now the Upside Down is bleeding through into reality, contaminating the environment, killing plant life, probably spreading like an infection. If that infection spreads far enough, it could theoretically consume the entire world, turning Earth into a second Upside Down. That seems to be Vecna's endgame, creating a new world order where he's the apex predator and the Mind Flayer's forces serve as his army. He'd be a god in this new reality, reshaping the planet to match his twisted worldview. What's really interesting is the connection to his childhood. Henry was fascinated by spiders as a kid, studying how they trap and consume prey. He saw himself as a spider, superior to the flies caught in the web of human society. The Upside Down reflects that mentality. It's literally a web of vines and decay, trapping victims and draining their life force. He's trying to turn the entire world into his web. Now here's where it gets complicated. The Mind Flayer. We learned in Season 4 that Henry found the Mind Flayer in the Upside Down and shaped it into the spider form we've seen. But some fans question whether that's the whole truth. The Mind Flayer seems ancient and powerful in a way that suggests it might predate Henry's arrival. What if Henry didn't create or control it? What if the Mind Flayer allowed Henry to think he was in control while actually manipulating him the whole time? That would be a proper twist. Henry thinks he's the master villain, reshaping the world according to his vision, but really, he's just a puppet for something older and more malevolent. The Mind Flayer could be using Henry's connection to 11 and his knowledge of the human world to invade and conquer. Henry's not the final boss, he's the penultimate one. Before looking into this theory, I honestly hadn't considered that possibility, but it would explain some oddities. Why does the Upside Down exist at all? Why was it already there when 11 sent Henry through in 1979? If the Mind Flayer created it, that suggests the Mind Flayer is a dimension-creating entity, something beyond just a big monster. Understanding Vecna's plan, whether he's truly in control or being used, helps us predict how the heroes might actually stop him. If he's a puppet, cutting his strings might not be enough. The Mind Flayer would still be there, waiting. Let's talk about one of the most debated predictions. How exactly does Vecna meet his end? There are several competing theories, and honestly, the answer might be a combination of all of them. Theory 1 is the classic confrontation. 11 versus Vecna, good versus evil, final battle. They're mirrors of each other, both products of Brenner's experiments, both immensely powerful. A psychic duel in the void or in Vecna's mindscape would be thematically appropriate. 11 could potentially gather power from the other test subjects who died, channeling them like she did in her memory sequences. Or maybe she combines her power with Will's connection to the Upside Down, creating a link that lets her hurt Vecna in ways he can't defend against. The main issue with this theory is it feels a bit obvious. The hero fights the villain. The hero wins. It's satisfying but not particularly surprising. The Duffers might want something more complex. Theory 2 focuses on Max as the key. If her consciousness is trapped inside Vecna's mind, she becomes a weapon he can't defend against. Imagine 11 and others attacking Vecna externally, while Max fights him from within, destroying him from the inside out. That would be poetic justice. The victim becomes the destroyer. Max would get her hero moment, proving she's not just a damsel to be rescued. She's powerful in her own right. Theory 3 involves Will as the secret weapon. His connection to the Mind Flayer and the Upside Down could make him immune to Vecna's powers, or it could let him navigate the Upside Down in ways others can't. There's a D&D parallel here too. In the game, the party's cleric or wizard often has true sight, the ability to see through illusions and deceptions. Will's connection might give him true sight against Vecna's mind games. He could be the one who finds the weakness, the vulnerability that everyone else misses. Theory 4 is the ensemble approach. Everyone plays a role. 11 provides the raw power. Max attacks from within. Will guides them through the Upside Down. The older teens create distractions. Hopper and Joyce lead the physical assault. It becomes a coordinated attack where Vecna's overwhelmed from multiple angles simultaneously. No single hero saves the day. It's the found family working together, which honestly fits the show's themes better than a solo victory. What's really interesting is that they tried to kill Vecna in Season 4 and failed. Nancy shot him, they burned him, he fell multiple stories, he survived all of it because he's connected to the mind flayer and the upside down itself. So whatever method they use in season 5 has to be different. They need to sever his connection to his power source, probably by closing the gates or destroying the mind flayer or both. I think the answer is probably a combination approach. 11 and Max team up psychically, while Will guides a physical team through the upside down to destroy whatever is anchoring Vecna's power. It takes everyone working together, and probably at least one major sacrifice. That feels like the proper ending for this show. Nobody does it alone. Whatever method they use, it's not going to be simple. This is the final boss, after all, and he's been built up for 5 seasons, if you count the Mind Flayer as his predecessor. His death needs to feel earned. Now, if you're wondering what happens to the Upside Down after Vecna's gone, you're asking the right question. Because defeating the villain is only half the battle. The alternate dimension itself is the real problem. There are several possibilities for how the Upside Down gets resolved, and each has different implications for Hawkins and the world. Possibility 1 is total closure. 11 seals all the gates permanently, cutting off the Upside Down from our reality forever. This would require enormous power, probably burning out her abilities completely or worse, but it would work. The Upside Down would still exist as a separate dimension, just quarantined from Earth. No more monsters, no more invasions, it's over. This is the cleanest ending, but requires the biggest sacrifice from 11. Possibility 2 is separation without destruction. The gates close, but the Upside Down remains, and there's always the possibility someone could open a new gate in the future. This is the safe sequel option ending. It provides closure for this story while leaving the door open, literally, for future content. Spin-off shows could explore new characters dealing with the lingering threat. It's pragmatic from a franchise perspective, but less emotionally satisfying. Possibility 3 is mutual destruction. Closing the gates or defeating Vecna causes the Upside Down to collapse, but the feedback destroys Hawkins in the process. Everyone has to evacuate, and the town becomes a dead zone, a permanent scar where the dimensions touched. This would be properly tragic. The heroes win, but they lose their home. That's the most bittersweet ending, victory with massive cost. Possibility 4 is the time loop resolution. This theory gets wild, but stick with me. If the Upside Down being frozen on November 6, 1983 is significant, maybe the solution involves breaking that loop. Perhaps someone, probably Will, has to travel back to that exact moment and change something fundamental. Maybe they prevent the gate from opening in the first place, creating an alternate timeline where none of this ever happened. But that would erase all their experiences, all their growth, possibly their relationships. It's a monkey's paw ending where they save the world but lose themselves. Before we can answer which possibility is most likely, we need to understand what the Upside Down actually is. If it's a natural dimension that was just discovered and corrupted, closing the gates makes sense. If 11 created it when she sent Henry there, destroying it might be easier because it's fundamentally unstable. If the Mind Flayer created it as a staging ground for invasion, defeating the Mind Flayer might cause it to collapse on its own. The environmental damage we saw at the end of Season 4 suggests the Upside Down contamination spreads if left unchecked. Plants died, the sky turned red. Those particles kept falling. If Season 5 picks up immediately after, we'll probably see Hawkins deteriorating rapidly, giving the characters a time limit. They can't just plan and prepare forever. The town is literally dying around them. Fun fact about the Upside Down that a lot of people forget, it's not just a mirror of Hawkins. It's specifically Hawkins from November 6, 1983. Nancy noticed this in Season 4 when her diary entries from later dates weren't there. So the Upside Down is frozen in time somehow, which suggests time manipulation might be involved in both its creation and its resolution. The Upside Down's fate is honestly almost as important as Vecna's defeat. You can kill the villain, but if the hell dimension stays open, did you really win? I've gotten to this point in the predictions and I'm just now realising I haven't mentioned one of the wildest theories floating around the fandom: time travel. Now, before you write this off as too complicated or too sci-fi for Stranger Things, hear me out. The show's already established that Eleven has mental abilities that bend reality. She can access memories, create doorways between dimensions, and see remote locations. Is time manipulation really that much further? The main evidence for time travel theories is the Upside Down being frozen on November 6th, 1983. That's the exact day Will disappeared. Not the day Eleven opened the first gate in the lab, that happened earlier. Not the day she sent Henry to the Upside Down, that was 1979. Specifically, November 6, 1983, the day the Demogorgon took Will. One theory suggests that Will travels back to that date during Season 5, either physically or through some form of psychic projection. He's the one who communicates with his mother through the Christmas lights. He's the one making the sounds in the Upside Down that led to his rescue. It's a bootstrap paradox. Will saves himself through time travel. This would explain his connection to the Upside Down that persists through multiple seasons. It's not just because he was trapped there or possessed. He's fundamentally linked to that specific moment in time, the moment the Upside Down became frozen. Another variation suggests Eleven creates an alternate timeline when she opens the gates. Every time she tears open reality, she's not just opening space, she's affecting time. The Upside Down exists in a temporal loop, constantly replaying 1983 because that's when the first real breach occurred. Breaking the loop might require going back and doing something different, changing a key decision. The grandfather clock that Vecna uses is interesting here too. Clocks are symbols of time, obviously, and Vecna's clock is broken, stuck on a specific time. That's pretty heavy-handed symbolism. Time is broken in the Upside Down, and Vecna's connected to that brokenness. Fixing time might be part of defeating him. Now, the Montauk Project, which was the original title for Stranger Things before they changed it, has time travel elements in the conspiracy theories surrounding it. The Duffer Brothers have said they moved away from that initial concept, but what if they didn't completely abandon it? What if time manipulation has been seeded throughout the show, waiting for the final season to pay it off? There are other small clues too. 11 accessing memories looks a lot like time travel, just passive observation instead of active participation. The Mind Flayer seems to know things it shouldn't know, suggesting either time loops or precognition. Will's now memories, his visions of the Mind Flayer's plans, could be glimpses of the future or alternate timelines. I'm not saying time travel is definitely happening. The Duffers might think it's too complicated or too much of a genre shift, but the pieces are there if they want to use them. To be honest, I think there's some form of time manipulation involved, even if it's not full-time travel. Maybe it's just that closing the gates requires returning the Upside Down to its proper timeline, unfreezing it from 1983. Or maybe someone has to make a choice in a psychic space that retroactively affects past events. It doesn't have to be Back to the Future rules to still involve time as a key element. Whether or not time travel is actually in play, the bootstrap paradox vibes are definitely there. The frozen date, the loops, the sense that everything's been predetermined. That's time travel storytelling, even if the mechanics stay vague. When it comes to the actual finale, there's basically two ways this could go down, with variations within each. Scenario 1 is the Siege of Hawkins. The town becomes a battlefield with multiple fronts. The military gets involved, probably after the government finally admits what's happening. Civilians evacuate while the main characters, and whatever forces they can muster, defend against waves of upside-down creatures. Demogorgons, Demodogs, Demobats, all of Vecna's forces pouring through the massive rift in the centre of town. In this scenario, you'd have different groups handling different objectives. Maybe Hopper and Joyce lead the civilian evacuation. Maybe Steve, Nancy, Robin, and Jonathan hold a defensive position, keeping monsters away from the evacuation routes. Maybe the kids form a strike team that infiltrates through the gate to reach Vecna directly. It's war on a scale the show's never attempted before. The main challenge with this scenario is budget and logistics. A full-scale battle with hundreds of extras, military equipment, and CGI creatures would be expensive and complex, but it's also properly epic. After 4 seasons of building tension, going all out for the finale makes sense. Scenario 2 is more focused. A small team goes into the Upside Down on a suicide mission, while a secondary team defends the gate in Hawkins. This is more like the Season 4 structure, with parallel storylines that converge. Maybe it's 11, Will, Mike, and a couple others going into the Upside Down, navigating that hellscape to reach Vecna's lair, or the Mind Flayer's location. Meanwhile, everyone else holds the line in Hawkins, making sure the gate doesn't expand further and that reinforcements can't reach Vecna. This scenario is tighter, more personal. It allows for character moments during the infiltration, emotional beats, difficult choices. Not everyone comes back from this kind of mission, which raises the stakes, and it's probably more feasible to film, focusing resources on a few key locations and action sequences rather than a sprawling battlefield. Now, there's going to be government involvement either way. Colonel Sullivan and his forces were introduced in Season 4, and they represent the militaristic response to the supernatural threat. They don't trust 11, they don't understand the Upside Down, and they're likely to make things worse with their interference. Part of the final battle might involve our heroes fighting on 2 fronts, against both the Upside Down forces and against misguided human authorities. I'd say Scenario 2 is more likely because the show's always been more personal than epic. It's about this specific group of people, not armies and large-scale war. A focused strike team mission lets them explore the Upside Down more, show us new horrors, and keep the emotional stakes centered on the characters we care about. Picture this: 11, Will, Mike, and maybe Max if she's recovered, entering the Upside Down through the gate. They're navigating through twisted versions of familiar Hawkins locations, fighting off creatures, dealing with Vecna's mind attacks. Meanwhile, back in Hawkins, Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, Robin, Hopper, Joyce, and the others are holding the perimeter, keeping the gate stable, fighting off anything that tries to follow the strike team. The climax happens in 2 places simultaneously. 11 confronts Vecna in his mindscape, while Mike and Will destroy whatever physical anchor is keeping him powerful. Max attacks from within his mind. Back in Hawkins, a massive creature, maybe the fully manifested Mind Flayer, emerges and has to be held off long enough for the strike team to succeed. It's chaos, it's desperate, and someone doesn't make it out. But in the end, they win. The gate closes, Vecna dies, the Upside Down is sealed away. That feels like proper Stranger Things, intimate character moments within an epic framework. Peak storytelling, honestly. Let's talk about some specific moments that feel basically inevitable for the finale, things that would be shocking if they didn't happen. First, someone saying, "Friends don't lie, one last time." That's been 11's core principle since Season 1, the first important thing Mike taught her. In a critical moment, probably when someone's about to sacrifice themselves or make a difficult choice, that phrase is coming back. Maybe Mike says it to 11. Maybe 11 says it to Max, but it's happening. Second, "Should I Stay or Should I Go" is playing during an emotional moment. That song is Jonathan and Will's song. It's been significant since the first episode. During a scene where they're separated or one of them is in danger, that song will play, either diegetically or as score. I'd bet money on it. Third, there's going to be a major character death. Possibly more than one. The Duffers have basically confirmed this. Someone we care about isn't making it to the end. My money's on Steve or Murray, or potentially one of the parents. The main kids probably have plot armor, but anyone older is vulnerable. Fourth, 11 has a goodbye scene. Whether she's losing her powers, dying, or just acknowledging that her supernatural life is ending, there's going to be a moment where she says goodbye to her abilities or her old life. It's going to be proper emotional, probably with Hopper and Mike present. Fifth, the party plays D&D one final time. This has to happen. The show started with them playing a campaign. It needs to end with them finishing one. Maybe it's in the epilogue, years later, them reuniting as adults. Maybe it's right before the final battle, one last game for old time's sake. But that image of them around the table, older, scarred, but still together, that's essential. Sixth, there will be a time jump epilogue showing where everyone ended up. This is standard for final seasons, showing the characters years later, settled into their lives. We'll see who stayed together, who moved away, who had kids, who achieved their dreams. It provides closure and shows that life continued after the adventure ended. Seventh, there's going to be a final shot that mirrors something from season 1. The Duffers love symmetry and callbacks. Maybe it's another shot of Hawkins from above, showing the town rebuilt or abandoned. Maybe it's someone biking through the neighborhood, reflecting the opening of the series. But something will echo the beginning, bringing everything full circle. I mean, come on, they have to hit these beats. These aren't just predictions, they're narrative necessities. Skip any of them, and the ending would feel incomplete. Fun fact about the show's structure: the Duffers have said repeatedly that Season 5 is meant to function as a feature-length film broken into episodes. That means it's going to follow film storytelling rules more than TV rules. Everything's building to one climax, not multiple cliffhangers. The pacing will be tighter, more focused. If you remember from their interviews, they specifically mentioned wanting Season 5 to feel like the final act of a long movie. That means these emotional beats, these callbacks, these character moments, they're all going to hit hard because they're the culmination of 9 years of storytelling. These beats feel so inevitable that I'd be shocked if at least half of them don't happen. And now, let's talk about the elephant in the room and some of the wilder speculation floating around. Now, you can't talk about a final season without addressing who might not make it to the end. The Duffers have basically warned us not everyone's surviving. So let's rank the death predictions by likelihood, starting with the most probable. Number 1 most likely to die is Steve Harrington, and I hate even typing that because he's become such a beloved character. But think about it. Steve's entire arc has been about growth from selfish jerk to selfless hero. He's the babysitter, the protector, the guy who keeps throwing himself into danger to save the kids. His Season 4 speech to Nancy about his dream future, wanting 6 kids, road tripping across America with a packed RV, that's a massive death flag in TV writing. When a character starts talking about specific future plans, they usually don't make it to see them. Steve's death would accomplish several narrative goals. It would raise the stakes by killing a major character who's been there since Season 1. It would resolve the love triangle without Nancy having to reject him directly. She'd be free to be with Jonathan, while still mourning what could have been with Steve. And it would devastate Robin, giving her major emotional trauma and character development. A heroic sacrifice protecting Dustin or the kids would be completely in character for Steve. He'd absolutely take a fatal blow meant for someone else. The main argument against Steve dying is that it would break the fandom's heart. He's gone from hated villain to fan favourite, and killing him would be brutal. But the Duffers might think that's exactly why his death would have impact. You kill the character people love to show that no one's safe. Number 2 most likely is Murray Bauman. He's important enough that his death would matter, but not so central that it breaks the show's emotional core. Murray's the comic relief conspiracy theorist who's somehow become integral to the plot. He's helped Joyce and Hopper, he's been to Russia, he's seen some shit. But comic relief characters are vulnerable in final seasons because their death creates shock value without destroying key relationships. I could totally see Murray making a heroic sacrifice, probably to save Joyce and Hopper, and making some sarcastic joke as he goes. I knew I should have stayed out of this supernatural nonsense. That would be fitting for his character, going out on his terms with his sense of humour intact. Number 3 is Dr. Sam Owens, or Colonel Sullivan, the government representatives. One of them probably dies to show that even authority figures can't control this situation. Owens' redemption through sacrifice, or Sullivan getting killed by the thing he was trying to weaponize. Either works narratively. Then we get into the less certain territory. Max Mayfield is possible, but depends entirely on whether they bring her back from her coma first. If she wakes up and then dies in the final battle, that's tragedy compounded. If she never wakes up and they pull the plug, that's different but equally heartbreaking. Lucas's grief would be central to either scenario. Eddie Munson is already dead, so he doesn't really count, but there are theories about him coming back as a vampire or upside-down creature. That's probably wishful thinking from fans who weren't ready to lose him. He's staying dead most likely. The unlikely deaths are Nancy, Jonathan, and Robin from the older teens. They've all got too much plot armor and unresolved storylines. Nancy's a final girl archetype. She's been a survivor since season 1. Jonathan needs to reconcile his relationship with Nancy and his responsibility to his family. Robin's queer representation and killing her would feel cheap and cruel. They're probably safe. The main kids, Mike, Will, Dustin, Lucas, they've got the most plot armor of anyone. Killing one of the original party would fundamentally break the show's found family theme. Possible? Sure. Likely? I don't think so. The Duffers might be willing to kill Steve or Murray, but killing one of the kids would be a bridge too far. Their survival is part of the show's hope. Hopper and Joyce are interesting cases. They could die in a parental sacrifice, throwing themselves into danger to save their kids. That's a classic trope, but they've both been through so much, survived so many close calls, that killing them now would feel cruel rather than tragic. I think the Duffers let them live, and finally get their happy ending together. Eleven's a special case. She's the protagonist, the heart of the show. Her death would be the ultimate sacrifice, saving the world at the cost of her life. It's thematically powerful, but it's also maybe too dark for a show that's ultimately about hope and survival. I think she survives but loses her powers, which is a kind of death for who she was. To be honest, I think Steve dies heroically. Murray goes out making a joke. Max potentially dies if they bring her back. And everyone else survives to pick up the pieces. That's the level of loss that feels earned without being gratuitous. Death predictions are always rough, but in a final season, someone's got to go. Stakes don't feel real unless there are consequences. I've gotten to the really fun part now, the absolutely mental theories that might actually be true. Theory 1 is that 11 created the Upside Down. Not discovered it, not opened a gateway to it, but literally created the dimension when she sent Henry Creel there in 1979. Think about it. We've never seen evidence that the Upside Down existed before that moment. When 11 banished Henry, she opened a rift in reality and cast him through. But what if there was nothing on the other side until that moment? What if her powers combined with Henry's created an entire dimension in that instant? This would make 11 indirectly responsible for everything that's happened. She created the Upside Down, and later she opened the gate that let the Demogorgon through, and her actions have been affecting reality throughout the series. It's a bootstrap paradox. She created the thing that threatened her, which caused her to create it. The loop feeds itself. Evidence for this theory includes the Upside Down being frozen on November 6, 1983, the day 11 opened the first gate in the lab. If she created the dimension, it makes sense that its temporal state is tied to her actions. The dimension's nature might reflect her subconscious too, dark and decaying because she was traumatized and afraid when she accessed that power. Theory 2 is that Will has powers he hasn't manifested yet. Why was he specifically targeted by the Demogorgon in Season 1? Out of everyone in Hawkins, why Will Byers? Either it was completely random, or there's something special about him that drew the creature. His survival in the Upside Down for a week supports this. Most people would die in hours, but Will managed to hide, communicate, and stay alive in a hostile environment without food or water. His now memories, his ability to sense the Mind Flayer and Vecna, could be early manifestations of psychic abilities similar to Eleven's. He might not have been trained like she was, so his powers stayed dormant. But in Season 5, under extreme stress, maybe they emerge. Will could become a powerful psychic in his own right, finally stepping out of Eleven's shadow. Theory 3 involves multiple 11s or timeline splits. The 3 inches comment from Season 4, where 11 tells Mike he's grown, might be a hint that she's from a slightly different timeline or that she's seen alternate versions of events. If time travel is involved, there might be multiple iterations of 11, each from different decision points. One 11 who saved Max, another who didn't, etc. The final battle could involve these versions converging. This theory gets pretty complicated pretty fast, but Stranger Things has dealt with parallel dimensions before. Parallel timelines aren't that much stranger, conceptually. And it would explain some continuity oddities that fans have noticed over the seasons. Theory 4 is that the Mind Flayer is the real villain, and Vecna's just a puppet. Henry Creel thinks he's in control, shaping the Mind Flayer to his will. But what if the Mind Flayer is ancient and intelligent and has been manipulating him the whole time? What if it let Henry think he was in charge so it could use his connection to 11 and his knowledge of the human world? This would mean killing Vecna doesn't solve anything. The Mind Flayer would still be there, just looking for another host. The true final boss reveal would come after Vecna's defeat, when the heroes realize the real threat remains. Before looking into these theories, I honestly hadn't considered how much evidence there is for each one. The show's been seeding possibilities for years, and Season 5 could pull the trigger on any of them. Now, are all these theories true? Probably not. The Duffers might think some of them are too complicated or too much of a twist, but the pieces are there, and speculation is half the fun of waiting for a final season. What's really interesting about these wild theories is they all fundamentally change how we understand the story. 11 creating the Upside Down recontextualizes her entire arc. Will having powers makes his passivity throughout most of the series more tragic. Multiple timelines turn the story into a multiverse tale. The Mind Flayer being in control shifts who the real antagonist is. Any of these could be true, and the show would still work. That's good storytelling, leaving enough ambiguity that multiple interpretations fit. I'm not sure I buy all of these, but they're fascinating to consider. Proper mental, some of them, but that's part of why they're compelling. Let's talk about some different ways this whole thing could end. Beyond the obvious defeat Vecna, close gates, everyone goes home scenario. Scenario 1 is the bittersweet victory. They win, but Hawkins is destroyed or permanently contaminated. The town has to be evacuated. Everyone loses their homes, and the place they've been fighting to protect is just gone. The characters survive, mostly, but they're scattered. Mike goes to college in one state, Dustin in another, Lucas somewhere else. They promise to stay in touch, and maybe they do for a while, but life pulls them in different directions. Years later, they reunite in the epilogue. Maybe it's for a funeral, someone who died in the battle, or maybe it's just a planned get-together. They're adults now, with jobs and relationships and responsibilities. They drive past where Hawkins used to be, now just a fenced-off government zone with warning signs. They remember what it was like, what they did there, but it feels distant, like someone else's life. This is probably the most realistic ending, if I'm honest. Found families often drift apart as people age, even when the bonds are strong. It's sad but natural. They saved the world, but they couldn't save their childhood or their town. That's bittersweet in the truest sense. Scenario 2 is the Pyrrhic victory. They win, but the cost is massive. Multiple main character deaths, Hawkins in ruins, survivors dealing with PTSD and trauma that prevents them from living normally. This is the darkest timeline, where victory feels hollow because of what they lost to achieve it. In this version, maybe Eleven and Steve and Murray and Max all die. The remaining characters are broken by grief. They can't go back to normal life because they are fundamentally changed by what they experienced and what they lost. The epilogue shows them struggling years later, still haunted, still unable to move on. This would be properly devastating and probably too dark for the show's tone. Stranger Things has always balanced horror with hope, and this version tips too far into nihilism. Possible, but unlikely. Scenario 3 is the hopeful ending. Clean victory with minimal losses. They defeat Vecna, close the gates, and Hawkins rebuilds. Everyone gets their happy ending. Steve doesn't die, he gets his 6 kids eventually. Nancy and Jonathan work out their relationship. Will comes out and finds acceptance. 11 lives a normal life with Hopper and Joyce. The epilogue shows them years later, still close, still in each other's lives. Maybe they're celebrating someone's wedding or a holiday gathering. Their kids play together, and the cycle continues, but healthier this time. It's optimistic and warm and safe. This is the least likely because it's too neat. No real consequences, no permanent scars. The Duffers have said the ending's bittersweet, which rules out completely happy. But it's what the characters deserve after everything they've been through. Scenario 4 is the ambiguous ending. They close the gates and defeat Vecna, but there are hints that the Upside Down still exists and could come back. The victory is for now rather than permanent. The epilogue shows life returning to normal, but there's an ominous shot at the end. Maybe lights flickering, or that familiar Upside Down sound, or Will feeling something on his neck again. This is the spin-off bait ending. It gives closure to this story while leaving the door open for future Stranger Things. Content with new characters. Pragmatically, it makes sense from a franchise perspective. Emotionally, it might feel like a cheat, like the heroes didn't really win. Honestly, I'm hoping for Scenario 1, the bittersweet victory where they win but lose their home and drift apart. That feels true to life in a way that honours the characters and the story. You can't go back to childhood once it's over, even if you survive. That's melancholy but beautiful. Whatever ending we get, it's going to be emotionally devastating in one way or another. The Duffers aren't going to give us a clean, easy conclusion. This story's been building for too long for that. When it comes to epilogues, there's basically a formula that final seasons follow, and I'd be surprised if Stranger Things deviates too much from it. First, there will definitely be a time jump, probably 5 to 10 years after the main events. This lets us see the characters as adults, or at least young adults, settled into their post-Hawkins lives. The kids will be in their mid to late 20s, the older teens in their early 30s, different life stages, different priorities. The epilogue will probably show where each character ended up. Maybe Mike became a writer, documenting their adventures in fiction that no one believes is real. Maybe Dustin's a scientist, working on something cutting edge. Lucas could be coaching kids' sports, passing on his experiences. Will might be an artist, expressing his trauma and survival through paintings or illustrations. For the older characters, maybe Nancy's an investigative journalist exposing corruption. Jonathan's a photographer whose work focuses on overlooked communities. Robin's a teacher or professor inspiring the next generation. Steve, if he survives, might actually have that family he wanted, or maybe he's Uncle Steve to everyone else's kids, the fun. Bachelor, who never quite settled down. Hopper and Joyce are hopefully living quietly, somewhere warm, California or New Mexico, raising whatever kids still need raising and enjoying peace for the first time in years. They've earned retirement from supernatural nonsense. 11, if she lost her powers, is probably living the most normal life of anyone. Maybe she's a teacher or a counsellor, someone who helps others because she remembers what it's like to need help. Or maybe she's just living quietly, enjoying ordinary things like going to movies and eating waffles without world-ending stakes attached. The reunion probably happens around a specific event. Someone's getting married probably, or it's the anniversary of the battle. They all come back to Indiana, though probably not Hawkins if the town was destroyed. They gather together, and it's awkward at first because years have passed and people change. But then they start talking, remembering, and the old bonds resurface. There might be a scene where they play D&D together one more time. Their last campaign. They're sitting around a table, older and scarred, but still fundamentally the same people. Will's probably the DM now, telling the story instead of just experiencing it. And he guides them through a final adventure that mirrors what they lived through, giving them a chance to rewrite the ending in fantasy, the way they couldn't in reality. The actual final shot has several possibilities. It could be a wide shot of the group laughing together, the camera pulling back to show them small within a large world, no longer the centre of universe-threatening drama. Or it could mirror the opening of Season 1, another group of kids on bikes in Hawkins or somewhere else, suggesting the cycle continues, but differently. Or maybe it's just a quiet shot of Hawkins rebuilt, normal, with no sign that anything supernatural ever happened there. What I think would be properly emotional is if the final shot shows a memorial, a statue or monument in a park honouring those who died defending Hawkins. The characters we lost are remembered, and the survivors visit to pay respects before moving on with their lives. The camera lingers on the names carved into stone, then fades to black. To be honest, this part makes me proper emotional just thinking about it. These characters have been part of our lives for so long that saying goodbye to them is going to hurt, regardless of how the story ends. The epilogue is where we get closure, where we see that life continued even after the adventure ended. That's the most important thing, really. Showing that surviving isn't the end, it's the beginning of a new chapter. You carry your experiences and your trauma and your friendships forward into whatever comes next. I've gotten to this point in the predictions and realised we should talk about what this ending means, beyond just the story itself. Stranger Things has become a cultural phenomenon in a way few shows manage. It's influenced fashion, music, how people think about the 1980s, even nostalgia as a concept. Season 5's ending will affect how the show's remembered, and whether it's considered a successful complete story or one that fumbled at the finish line. The pressure on the Duffers is enormous. They have to satisfy long-time fans who've invested years in these characters, while also delivering an ending that works for casual viewers. They have to wrap up complex plot lines without leaving major loose ends, but also without over-explaining everything and removing the mystery. It's a really difficult balance. What's really interesting about Stranger Things, as a phenomenon, is how it brought back serialized storytelling to mainstream audiences. Before it, a lot of Netflix shows were cancelled after 1 or 2 seasons. Stranger Things proved you could build a multi-season narrative and keep people engaged year after year. Season 5's ending will test whether that investment pays off. There are confirmed spin-off plans which complicates the ending. The Duffers need to provide closure for this story while keeping the world alive for future content. That means the ending probably won't close every door. The Upside Down might remain as a concept, or there might be hints that supernatural weirdness exists elsewhere. But the core story, the party story, needs to feel complete. Let's be honest, final seasons are tough. For every Breaking Bad that sticks the landing, there's a Game of Thrones that falls apart. For every Return of the King, there's a Matrix Revolutions. Stranger Things has been consistently good, but that doesn't guarantee the ending will satisfy everyone. I mean, we grew up with these characters. People who started watching Stranger Things in 2016 are in completely different life stages now. The show means something personal to a lot of people, and that makes any ending controversial. Someone's favourite character will die. Someone's preferred ship won't happen. Plot threads they cared about will get less focus than they hoped. But here's the thing. The show's already earned its place in TV history, regardless of how Season 5 goes. The first 4 seasons are excellent. The performances, the writing, the atmosphere, all top tier. Even if the finale disappoints, which I don't think it will, the journey was worth it. What I think matters most is whether the ending feels true to the characters and themes. If Eleven's fate makes sense for her arc, if the found family theme is honoured, if the deaths feel earned rather than cheap, then it works. You can forgive a lot of imperfect plot mechanics if the emotional beats land. The rewatch value will depend heavily on the ending too. Shows with bad finales often struggle in rewatches because you know the destination isn't satisfying. But shows with good endings become comfort rewatches, something you return to when you want to experience that story again. I've got faith in the Duffers, honestly. They've been planning this for years. They care about these characters as much as we do, and they understand the weight of ending something beloved. Will everyone love it? No, that's impossible. But will it feel like a proper conclusion to this story? I think so. Pretty mental when you think about how much a TV show can affect culture and how much pressure is on these writers to deliver. But that's the nature of creating something people care about. The ending has to honour that care. Now let's talk about some behind-the-scenes stuff about Season 5 that might give us clues about the ending. Fun fact about Season 5's production: filming started in early 2024 and is taking way longer than previous seasons. Part of that is because it's the final season and they want to get it right. But it also suggests the scope is bigger, more complex action sequences, more location shoots, more visual effects work. That supports the theory that Season 5 goes bigger than anything before. According to cast members in various interviews, the scripts made them cry. Multiple actors have said reading the finale left them emotional, which could mean character deaths or just the weight of ending the show. Millie Bobby Brown specifically said saying goodbye to Eleven was one of the hardest things she's done, which hopefully means Eleven survives, but her story concludes in a way that feels final. What loads of people don't know is that the Duffers have changed some plot points based on fan theories getting too close. They've admitted in interviews that when fans correctly predict major twists, they sometimes adjust to preserve surprise. This makes predicting the ending harder because the Duffers are actively working against popular theories. Anything too obvious might get changed. The episode count for Season 5 hasn't been officially confirmed yet, but reports suggest 8 episodes, same as Season 4's splits combined. However, these episodes are apparently longer, possibly feature-length. The finale itself might be over 2 hours. This gives them room to properly resolve everything without rushing. There have been set photos of the cast filming in locations that look like normal Hawkins, suggesting flashbacks or that parts of the town survive. There have also been photos of military vehicles and equipment, confirming that the government's role expands in Season 5. And there are rumours, just rumours, of a scene filmed in a location that looks like the Upside Down's equivalent of the Hawkins Middle School, suggesting they go deeper into that dimension than ever before. Apparently, during filming, the cast and crew held a special wrap party after completing the final scene. David Harbour posted a cryptic message about endings and beginnings without revealing anything specific. Finn Wolfhard said in an interview that he's satisfied with Mike's ending, which hopefully means positive closure for that character. What's also fascinating is that the Duffers originally planned Stranger Things as a limited series, just 1 season. When it became a phenomenon, they expanded the plan but always knew roughly how many seasons they'd need. 5 was always the target, according to their statements. So this isn't the case of a show going on too long or overstaying its welcome. They planned for this length. The music for Season 5 is being composed by Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein again, maintaining continuity with the iconic synth score. There are rumours they've created a new arrangement of the main theme for the finale, something that evolves the familiar melody into something both nostalgic and different. Music's going to be huge in the emotional impact. One more fun fact: the title cards for each episode in Season 5 apparently reference or call back to previous season titles. Episode titles haven't been revealed yet, but this suggests the show's coming full circle, echoing where it started. These little details make the wait for season 5 even more intense, honestly. Every behind-the-scenes tidbit gets analysed. Every cast interview gets scrutinised for hints. That's part of the fun of a final season, the speculation and anticipation. And that, my dear friends, is where we'll end tonight's predictions. Obviously, these are all just theories and speculation based on what we know from season 4 and various interviews. The actual season 5 could go in completely different directions, and we won't know for sure until it airs. In a future one, I'm definitely going to cover what actually happened after season 5 drops, comparing predictions to reality and diving into what the ending meant for the characters and the show's legacy. There's also loads more to explore about Stranger Things, like deep dives into specific characters, analysis of the show's themes, or even exploring the confirmed spin-off plans. But until next time, stay safe and sweet dreams.